So Natlan is soon coming. But while you wait, I will tell you the lore recap of Genshin's main story. Take this as a refresher and gathering of all of the stuff we know so far and all the progress throughout the 5 regions we have made as well. This video includes relevant information that you need to know throughout Genshin being around now for almost 4 years. So let's jump into the story now, shall we? The story starts by both siblings being stopped by some unknown god, also known as the sustainer of the heavenly principles. As I chose Aether, I am gonna say that Aether will be the main character, while Lumen will be a sibling and a princess of the Abyss Order. This god then separated both siblings, putting them both in Teyvat. Aether then woke up 500 years later, after he was separated from his sibling. Aether also has a traveling companion by the name of Paimon, whom he saved from drowning. At Starfell Lake, Aether touches the Enemo statue of the Seven and gained his Enemo elemental powers. Then the dragon by the name of Dvorlan showed up, who was also known by how people addressed him as Storm Terror, and so we followed it and then saw some bard by the name of Venti, who is an Enemo Archon, and once he noticed us, he got away, as well as the dragon. Then Aether gets stopped by an outrider from Knights of Favonius, who took us in Mondstadt. This is where we encountered Dvorlan once again, who attacked the city. In there, Aether got sucked up into the sky by a tornado, but thanks to Amber, who gifted us the wind glider, he fought off Dvorlan, and then a mysterious cavalry captain by the name of Kaeya showed up and then led us to the Knights of Favonius headquarters, where we met the acting Grandmaster Jean and Lisa the librarian. Then Jean asked us to deal with 3 of the 4 Winds temples to stop the storm terrorizing the region caused by the dragon. After they have been dealt with, we head back to Mondstadt and saw Jean arguing with someone from the Fatui organization, who are a powerful organization from Snezhnaya, looking around for things called the Noses. This Fatui diplomat wanted to kill the dragon, but Jean refused. Then eventually we met that bard again, who was singing while telling a story about Dvorlan. We learned that a dragon by the name of Duran invaded Mondstadt 500 years ago, created by one of the sinners from a destroyed region called Karnria, the same creator that created Albedo. Then Dvorlan came and took away Duran's life and ingested his blood that contained powers from the abyss when biting him. Dvorlan then after the battle rested for the next 500 years, leading to everyone forgetting about his existence. This made the current people terrified of him, thinking that he was despicable. After the bard's performance, he told us to meet him under the gigantic tree and told us that he also got infected from Dvorlan after Aether interrupted his conversation with the dragon. To make up for this, Venti sent Aether to the church to steal a holy lyre from Mondstadt's church. As we got to the holy lyre, our Fatui mage appeared and took the lyre with her, and then the guard spotted us. So Aether, Paimon and Venti then quickly got away by rushing to Mondstadt's most famous place called Angel's Share, which is a tavern owned by a famous Dawn winery owner, Diluc. Diluc then sent Knights of Favonius away and then told us to be in the tavern tonight. In there was also the acting Grandmaster Jean, and together we discussed on how to retrieve the holy lyre, and so we visited the Fatui hideout, and after we retrieved the holy lyre, we used it on Star Snatch Cliff to call out Dvorlan, but an evil abyss mage ruined our plan, made him think that we will betray him, and also completely destroying holy lyre in the process. Then the group together went to Storm Terror's lair. This is where a previous god by the name of Decarabian lived 2,600 years ago, before he got slain, and Barbatos, also known as Venti, ascended to godhood. This is where we met up with Dvorlan again and made him realize that the Abyss Order was tricking him into thinking that Enemo Archon and the rest of the group would betray him, and the acting Grand Master Jean also got to let know the citizens to not fear Dvorlan anymore, as they misunderstood him. Then the church asked us to return the holy lyre to Barbara, who is the deaconess of the Church of Favonius. Venti fixed the lyre for a temporary amount of time, and once we get out, the Fatui stop Adeptus and one of the Fatui harbingers by the name of Senora took Venti's noses. This means that Fatui have managed to collect 1 out of the 7 noses so far. With Mondstadt now being taken care of and clearing Dvorlin's name from the threat list, we now move on to Liyue, where something called a rite of dissension was happening. A rite of dissension is something that happens every once in a year. This is the only time when you can meet up with the Archon himself, and this ceremony is significant due to him giving his predictions and advices on economic matters for this year. This ceremony is always performed by one of the Cheesing, this time by Ning Vang. Ning Vang is also an owner of a floating building by the name of Jade Chamber and Tianchvan of Liyue Cheesing, who is a political leader in charge of laws. Basically, Cheesing are governments of Liyue who are also in control of the guards, which they go by the name of Millelith. As the rite of dissension begins, Archon as the dragon fell down and it seemed like he was killed. Ning Vang then tells Millelith to check for suspects to find the culprit, and as Ether tried to get away, he stepped on a piece of glass and the Millelith then chased after us, but luckily Tartaglia, also known as Child, came to rescue us. Tartaglia turned out to be one of the Fatui harbingers, however he was helping Ether. We had to report to the Adepti about this incident before Millelith does, in order to clear our name. Adepti are creatures that have lived for a very long time, led by Rex Lapis, also known as Archon, and their duty is to protect Liyue from dangers, as well as the Millelith. Ether then goes around Liyue and reports about Rex Lapis' death to Moon Carver, Mountain Shaper, Cloud Retainer and Shao. Once we let them know, we as Ether went back to Child and learned that they are keeping Rex Lapis' body away until they find out about the assassin. Then Ether goes to the restaurant by the name of Liyue Pavilion, where he meets a man who goes by the name of Shongli. He was currently working as a consultant for Hu Tao, who is the current director of the Wangsheng funeral parlor. Then Ether with Shongli goes to buy the needed funeral stuff for Rex Lapis, also provided by Child's Mora. We bought Noctilucus jade, silk flowers and some perfume. Then we also went to old lady by the name of Madame Ping to retrieve some bell, and apparently it was inside the teapot, and so we retrieved it and learnt that she is actually another Adepti. Then we went to the Boo Boo pharmacy to get some everlasting incense. In there we meet the owner of this pharmacy, who goes by the name of Baishu, and a little girl working for Baishu who goes by the name of Chi Chi. Chi Chi is actually around 100 years old, as she died at a very young age, but then got revived by the Adepti and is now a zombie. Either way, Baiju was selling everlasting incense for ridiculous amount of price, which was 3 million mora, and we simply couldn't afford this, even with the Fatui harbinger's money. However, luckily for us, Child then came to the Boo Boo pharmacy and agreed to pay for the thing. He then stepped out and asked the receptionist of the Northland Bank for some information, which they learned that Cheesing hid Rex Lapis' body inside the Golden House. Golden House is where all of the Mora is minted, and of course Mora is minted by none other than Archon himself. Meanwhile, Ether goes with Zhongli to the tavern, where a secretary of the Liyue Cheesing by the name of Ganyu appeared and told us the good news that Ningvang was actually inviting Ether to Jade Chamber. Then Ether tried to get up to the floating Jade Chamber, but unfortunately couldn't find a way. However, luckily he soon met up with an urban manager of Liyue Cheesing who goes by the name of Kaching, also known as Yuheng. She told him how to get to Jade Chamber, and Sir Ether went to meet Ningguang at the Jade Chamber, where we learnt that Fatui were researching the sigils of permission. As the meeting ended, Ether went to investigate the Fatui's research and found more of those sigils of permission. Then Ether went to meet with Shongli to get some glaze lilies, and in there we met Ganyu, who told us that she is another one of the Adepti. As we then separated with Ganyu and head back to the city, we saw a chaos going on. There was Cheesing going against the Fatui, and Shongli had to help out his boss as they have begun questioning the Wangsheng funeral parlor, due to their dealings with the Fatui. Aether then also decided to go look for Tartaglia, and so him and Paimon made a visit to the Golden House. In there we found the hidden body of Rex Lapis in the dragon form, and Child then comes behind our back, and not only he was onto the Geo-Noses, but also was looking for a fight. We dueled him, but he got to Rex Lapis' body first and attempted to pull out the noses, only to come out empty-handed, and so he activated his foul legacy on us, which is the transformation that he learned when spending his time inside the abyss. Yet Aether still managed to beat him even in his monstrous transformation, and then Child unleashed Sigils of Permission, the stuff that Fatui has been researching on, and then an ancient god by the name of Osile spawned from the sea, the god that was sealed by Rex Lapis, and in hope that he can lure out Rex Lapis himself, Aether together fought this monster with the help of cheesing and Adepti. Eventually our battle didn't go as planned, and it ended up backfiring at us, and Sir Ningguang decided to sacrifice her jade chamber. She controlled it to be right above the monstrous god, and then crushed it down at this ancient god. With all of this done, we said goodbye to Adepti and cheesing, but that still doesn't explain why Rex Lapis didn't show up, and was he even death in the first place. Aether then decided to check at Northland Bank, and to his surprise there were Fatui and Zhongli as well. Zhongli reveals himself to be the Geo-Archon this entire time once he handed his noses to the Fatui for fulfilling the contract. He also reveals that he was the one behind the events that had just occurred, and that his death and everything was just an act to see how would citizens of Liyue continue without the god. With him giving up his Geo-Noses to the Fatui, no more Mora is currently being minted anymore. And so after all of that, cheesing hosted the rite of parting, which was the ceremony for Rex Lapis' death that Aether and Paimon had been preparing with Zhongli. With the funeral completed, Aether goes to talk to Zhongli, and Zhongli reveals to them about Inazuma and their Electro-Archon. We also learned that no one was allowed to enter Inazuma due to wars. That law is also known as Sakoku Decree. Now eventually Ningguang decided to rebuild the Jade Chamber and makes an announcement to her people of Liyue. She still needed Sunset Vermilionite, Wonder Core and Adepti Sigils. The first 3 people who would gather the materials to help her rebuild the Jade Chamber will get rewarded by asking Ningguang any question. Aether decided to participate in this challenge, and yet he saw 2 men threatening a lady who went by the name of Shenhe for some money, so he called out the Millilith and they took them away. This Shenhe lady was rather a strange individual, as she knew nothing about the laws and was literally consuming medicine as her meal. This lady actually hails from the mountains, and as for saving her from troublemakers, she decided to help us in Ningguang's competition. Then Dr. Baishu came and told us that for Sunset Vermilionite they must head to Feiyun Commerce Guild, which is a powerful trading guild based in Liyue. Then we met with Qingchu, who is the second son of the guild manager of the Feiyun Commerce Guild. He realized that we entered Ningguang's contest and literally offers us the thing for 500 million Mora. But as none of us could afford this, he told us of an deceased Adepti by the name of Sea Gazer who was filled with this material in an area called Liyue. So Aether, Paimon and Shenhe then arrived at this abandoned place and eventually successfully obtained Sunset Vermilionite. One of the secretaries was impressed by Shenhe's work as she lifted this rock of Sunset Vermilionite all by herself, people also now seeing her as one of the Adepti. As Aether and Paimon then made Shenhe get some rest, Cloud Retainer, who is also known as Shanyun, appeared and revealed to us that Shenhe is actually just a human. Also that she is Shenhe's master who had raised her. The next day Aether and Paimon together with Shenhe checked up on the Jade Chamber, which was already floating in the sky due to Sunset Vermilionite. In there we also met Beidou, who was the captain of the fleet called the Crux, and Yoon Jin, who is an opera singer. Yoon Jin then also joins us as she was also participating in Ningguang's contest. Then all of us together went to ask the blacksmith guy for Wonder Core, and he said that we needed some Star Splinter Iron and Subrosium. Then we as the group went to the mountains to collect Star Splinter Iron and then started asking around the village for some Subrosium. We realized that we have to stand in the middle of the lake, and as we did, we discovered the required ore, and so the blacksmith guy created the Wonder Core. Shenna also made the last required item that we needed, which was some Adepti sigils, as she has some experience with Adepti and their stuff. Then the secretary announced Aether, Paimon, Shenna and Yoon-jin as the winners, and so we meet up with Ning Vang, where she revealed answers to us on where would Yoon-jin perform her opera, and for Paimon on how to run a successful business. As the Jade Chamber finally rises up and floats around in the air, Osial's wife appeared in front of us. Shenha then remembered her master's words and used all of her strength to prove to humans that she can be an amazing person as well. With Shenha and Millilith's help, we successfully together defeated another ancient god, then celebrated our victory on the Jade Chamber. With Yoon-jin performing her opera as Ning Vang allowed her to perform at the Jade Chamber at her question. Aether then went back to Mondstadt, and Catherine told him about a blonde stranger with an eye patch. Then he started asking around the Mondstadt and eventually found this stranger inside the tavern. His name was Dainsleaf, and he only takes commissions that are related to the Abyss Order, and told us about the Abyss Herald, a commander of the Abyss Mages. We then went to the Temple of the Falcon to try to find the Abyss Herald, but unfortunately were unsuccessful. Then we tried to find an Abyss Herald by going to an area called Wolvendom, yet still haven't found anything in there, so then Dainsleaf had one more place in mind, which was Stormterror's lair. Yet we still haven't found any Abyss Heralds. Instead, Aether came across this strange dandelion that gave him flashbacks from 500 years ago, and this is where we parted ways with Dainsleaf. Another important things we know about Dainsleaf so far is that he had a traveling companion. He's from Khaenri'ah and he is cursed with immortality and now alive for about 500 years. Then Aether and Paimon went to the Adventurers Guild in Liyue, where they met Ganyu. They told them that a bunch of thieves are trying to rob the Abyss Order. Then they went to the ruins, where they found a defiled statue of the Seven of Barbatos hanging upside down. In there was also a grand thief who was deceased, and Sir Paimon and Aether tried to escape, but then finally met up with the Hydro Abyss Herald. Hydro Abyss Herald then recognized Aether and decided to teleport away, and so they escaped the ruins and met up with Dainsleaf, who joins them. After that we started looking around Liyue in hopes of finding any Abyss Order's leads, and eventually found the talisman. This talisman said that the Abyss Order was planning to corrupt Osial's mind just like they did to Dvorlan, then also tried to transform his body to create their own god using the defiled statue. Then eventually we realized that the Abyss Order was in Wolvendom, all thanks to Sister Azaria, and so we head to the Wolvendom, where we met the Abyss Herald once again. He was trying to corrupt Bora's aka Andreas' mind, but Aether intercepted him and drove him away again. Bora's then told us about the Field Tiller, which is the first ever created Ruin Guard. Aether, Paimon and Dainsleaf then got to Stormterror's lair and observed the thing, and Sir Dainsleaf took its eye, as the Abyss Order was looking for it, and so now Dainsleaf is in the possession of the Field Tiller's eye. Then we went back to the ruins where that defiled statue is hanging down. A missing statue of the Seven confirmed by Barbara. Dainsleaf wanted to destroy it, but then is stopped by the Abyss Herald. Then as the Abyss Herald tried to get away once again, Dainsleaf tried to stop him, only to be interrupted by none other than Traveler's sibling Lumine. She told her brother about lots of useful information, and he came to the realization that his sister is the head of the Abyss. Lumine refused to go back home with Aether just yet, as she still has to accomplish her destiny, and Dainsleaf caught up with her by going inside the portal, leaving Aether and Paimon behind. With that, the first Dainsleaf quest is over, and we now move on to the third nation, which is Inazuma. Aether decided to go to the Crux and meet up with the person who could help him enter Inazuma, and that is none other than Beidou. They entered the ship called Alcor and in there met with some strange man who goes by the name of Kadahara Kazuha. Beidou insisted for Aether to join fighting tournament she held and said that if Aether wins, she will get him to Inazuma. Aether has easily managed to get to the finals, however the final opponent was nowhere to be found. Kazuha sensed that something wasn't right, and then we checked the winning prize, which was the vision, and it was missing. Aether, Paimon and Kazuha then went to look for the culprit and found out that a treasure hoarder did it, and so we caught up with him and retrieved the vision. As this treasure hoarder was supposed to be Aether's final opponent, he was disqualified and therefore Aether won the match, now being able to finally enter Inazuma. Kazuha also told us about his past and the history about this vision everyone was competing for. Kazuha once had a friend with an electrovision that got executed in a duel against Raiden Shogun. Kazuha, just witnessing the end of a duel, quickly took his vision and ran away. Now Kazuha wishes that his friend's vision would awaken. This all happened when Raiden Shogun enacted something called the Vision Hunt Decree, which is a law where Raiden Shogun's army seizes people's visions from the owners. Fatui are responsible behind this, as they had plans for this in order to create a market for delusions. Delusions are basically just more powerful visions created by the Fatui. Either way, Beidou brings Aether to Inazuma, and at arrival we meet someone named Thoma. This guy welcomed Aether to Inazuma and assisted him with the entry procedure and residence processing. Though prices had skyrocketed, so foreigners decided to set up something called International Trade Association so that outlanders could survive. Thoma agreed to help Aether on meeting with Raiden Shogun, but first he will need to give a hand to other people, including this foreigner trading organization. So we helped him out with their taxes and stuff, and then Thoma revealed himself to be a part of a clan called Kamasato clan, led by Kamasato Ayato, someone who is also in charge of one of the Tri-Commissions by the name of Yashuru Commission. Tri-Commission is made out of 3 organizations by the names of Tenryou Commission, Kanjo Commission and Yashuru Commission. Tenryou Commission is responsible for enforcing Sakoku Decree, Vision Hunt Decree and security matters. Kanjo Commission being responsible for financial matters and enforces Sakoku Decree 2, and Yashuru Commission responsible for cultural matters. Either way, Thoma is also responsible for taking care of Ayato's sister by the name of Kamasato Ayaka. Thoma then brought Aether to the Kamasato residence, where Ayaka made a deal with them that she would help them meet Raiden Shogun if they would visit 3 people who had their vision confiscated from them. Aether then visited them, helped him out, and then returned back to the Kamasato residence, where Ayaka finally revealed herself, as they were now friends for fulfilling her wishes. She told them that there are people creating fake visions to fool the guards in Vision Hunt Decree. One of them then ended up being exposed and sentenced to prison. Aether then went to break him out, and on his way met Yoimiya, a joyful fireworks shop owner. She was willing to help him out on their mission to save the guy. Together we went inside the prison and saw Tenryou Commission threatening the guy. Then Kujo Sera, a general of Raiden Shogun's army, appears. We distracted Tenryou Commission with the fireworks, yet Kujo Sera was watching us, but decided to let us escape and temporarily save the guy as guards were torturing the poor soul. Then Aether went to Komore Tea House to report to Ayaka about what happened. Komore Tea House is a place where only the ones approved by Kamasato clan are allowed to join. Then we decided to take a break for few days and then return back here for our next operations. When Aether returned back to Komore Tea House, Thoma went missing, and so they went to look for him and found him at the statue, where all of the seized visions are placed during the Vision Hunt Decree. Thoma's vision was supposed to be the 100 captured vision. But Aether intercepted the ceremony by saving his vision, and then Raiden's Shogun stepped in, and then they fought inside another dimension. Raiden's Shogun ended up knocking out poor Aether, and just as she was about to kill him, Thoma ended up saving Aether, and together the group ran away from Raiden's Shogun, now leaving Aether and Paimon as fugitives in Inazuma. Then Thoma suggests that Aether goes to Watatsumi Island to hide from Raiden's army. There is a Watatsumi army that fights against the Vision Hunt decree and protects citizens of Inazuma from Raiden's army. Aether at arrival meets up with the samurai named Teppei, who introduces them to the general of the Watatsumi army, going by the name of Goru. General Goru welcomes Aether into the army, but then somehow Raiden's army has broke into the island and started attacking the Watatsumi army. There was also a general of their army, Kujo Sera, and together we all fought against the Shogun army, even Kazuha and Beidou joining us. Another one who appeared was Sangonomiya Kokomi, the one in charge of the Watatsumi Island, and she helped us defeat the Shogun army and get him off the island. We also learned that Watatsumi army was lacking in supplies, but some mysterious supporters were providing them with supplies. It was later on revealed that this mysterious supporters are the Fatui supplying them with delusions, which those powerful things familiar to visions were making soldiers ill and killing them. After Teppei's death, Aether goes to the delusion factory, a place where the Fatui creates delusions. He wanted a revenge and to sabotage this factory, however 6th of the Fatui harbingers, Wanderer, was taking him down. More about him later in Sumeru. Luckily Yae Miko came to save Aether. Yae is the head of the Grand Narukami Shrine, a place where people worship Electro Archon herself, yet is also her friend, therefore she knows a lot about Raiden's Shogun and can help us out. Yae told us that Raiden's Shogun is actually just a puppet designed by the real Electro Archon, while the real god's name is A, and she is inside this dimension that Aether fought against her earlier. That inner world inside the puppet is called Plane of Euthymia. Yae then helps us out by convincing the general of Shogun's army that her father betrayed the Shogun, which will get her on our side. He indeed is dealing with the Fatui. Then Sera was encouraged to report his betrayal to Raiden's Shogun. In there was Senora, who knocked Sera out, but then Raiden's Shogun ended up killing Senora. Raiden's Shogun let Aether leave only to try to slay him outside, but then it was finally Kazuha's time to shine. The electro-vision of his old deceased friend finally awakened, and he striked towards Raiden's Shogun with the combined powers of his visions. After that Aether entered Plane of Euthymia, meeting A once again, and so they fought for their own rights. Yae enters Plane of Euthymia and joins in, and with her assistance Aether successfully defeated Electro Archon in a duel. After the duel we learnt that A lost her sister during the cataclysm of Khaenri'ah, who was also the former Electro Archon, therefore this is why she follows Eternity so much. Yae Miko then encourages Raiden to abolish Vision Hunt decree, and so she did. With that the Fatui lost the battle and plans for Vision Hunt decree, although Yae actually did give an Electro Noses to Wanderer when she rescued Aether, meaning that the Fatui already have 3 noses in their hands. Now before going to Sumeru we still have a few Archon quests that take place inside the chasm. Aether came to investigate the chasm as there was some strange Hilichurl activity going on in there. Inside there Aether and Paimon run into a strange city that was upside down, and then Dainsleif appeared behind them, which he got separated from an Abyss Herald and Lumine after chasing them in a portal. Dainsleif also told us that his traveling companion was Lumine. Dainsleif then gave us the answer on why Hilichurls were here, and it's actually because this place weakens the curse of immortality and they came here to peacefully pass away. In truth, Hilichurls used to actually be real humans who got turned into monsters during the cataclysm, and all of the monsters who wear masks were real humans from Khaenri'ah, and they wear them to hide their faces. We also met with Black Serpent Knights who used to be Dainsleif's subordinates, and one of them in here was Half Dan. Half Dan was one of the elite royal guards from Khaenri'ah who was told to to protect the people of Khaenri'ah by Dainsleif, only to turn into a monster in the end. Dainsleif also confirmed that the city Upside Down is older than Khaenri'ah and resembles it. At the Hilichurl camp, Aether saw a memory of Lumine upon touching the flower that hails from Khaenri'ah. She was planning to remove the curse, however Dainsleif confirmed that they have no chance of succeeding and that they must be stopped before they bring any more suffering. As we try to stop it, the Abyss Order already activated the device. Then Halfdan showed up and sacrificed himself, which gave us an opportunity to stop the device. When we stopped it, Halfdan's soul appeared in his human form and Dainsleif made him think that he protected Khaenri'ah. With that we got through another Dainsleif quest, and now we move on to the next chasm quest, which starts off by meeting with Yanfei inside the chasm, Liyue's top lawyer. She was acting strange, and once she left, Arataki Ito and Cookie Shinobu arrived. Ito is a monstrous creature type that goes by the name of Oni, and he's also the leader of his gang, while Cookie on the other hand is one of his members who helps out the gang. They were looking for Yanfei, a lawyer who also takes care of Ito and the gang, and figured out that Aether and Paimon have saw her. Then someone by the name of Yelan showed up, a very mysterious woman who claims to work for the Liyue Ministry of the Civil Affairs. Yelan then tried to make Arataki gang leave due to the danger, but as Ito was about to fight her, a ground broke which sends everyone flying down. As we were trying to find a way out, Shao shows up and he was looking for Bosatius, an Adeptus who was the leader of the 5 Yakshas. Either way, Shao vanishes and there seemed to be no way out, so we had to stay here underground. After a bit more research, Yelan found a secret path that led to the domain with a puzzle, which was a really dangerous place, so we got out of here. We then came across a mysterious door, and anyone who opened it and stepped inside got met with their worst fear. We also learned that Yelan works for Ning Vang. Eventually Shao managed to join the group. Shao is actually one of the Yakshas, in fact the only remaining one from this Adepti group, and despite the leader already being deceased, Shao was looking for him as his body wasn't discovered before and he went missing. Shao was also offering to sacrifice himself in order to get us out, but nobody accepted this offer and Ito couldn't stand their arguments, so he ended up literally punching the wall, uncovering another domain. Seriously though, I honestly think that this guy has brains inside his muscles. Anyway, we entered the domain and saw eventually Aether visited the Abyss and saw Lumine, who was actually just an illusion, which turns out to be a compass. This compass is an ancient magical technology that with the powers of a human and Adeptus combined could bring us back to the surface, getting us out of this dangerous place full of traps and illusions. All thanks to this compass we were able to get out of this scary place with all of us coming out alive and completely fine. In the end we learnt that the chasm is linked to the Abyss Order and Khaenri'ah and is a very mysterious place, yet deadly, as it even has the abilities of creating illusions and reading minds. Next up is finally Sumeru, and as Aether tried looking for Lesser Lord Kusanali, a Dendro Archon herself, and end up in area called Gandharvaville, a main base of the Forest Watchers. This is where he met Collei, a trainee forest ranger, and Tainari, a chief officer of the Forest Rangers and Collei's mentor. We learnt that Greater Lord Rukkhadevata, a former Dendro Archon, died during the cataclysm of Khaenri'ah, yet reincarnated into Lesser Lord Kusanali. We also learnt that Collei is suffering from a disease known as Elazar, which is a manifestation of the withering which forms on human skin that eventually causes immobility. The second of the Fatui Harbingers, also known as the Doctor, has also ran experiments on Collei, which made her even worse, as he experiments on children as well. Collei has also been to Mondstadt after being Doctor's victim, where she met characters like Amber and Kaeya who helped her out. With that, Collei is a great dear friend of Amber. The withering is a big problem around Sumeru that weakens threatens the area affected by it, and it spreads around the forests more and more. It all started when King Deshret introduced a forbidden knowledge. King Deshret was the lord of Sumeru Desert who has already passed away, and forbidden knowledge is a form of knowledge that comes from outside of Teyvat. The withering stems from a disease affecting and Sul, a gigantic tree from deep underground that has all of the memories in Teyvat and has ley lines as roots which record all of the memories in Teyvat, and the Dendro Archon herself is connected to this tree. Next up, Aether and Paimon head to Sumeru City in search of Lesser Lord Kusanali, and once they arrived, they are given the Arkasha terminals, which is a powerful device that can give out any information the user wants to know, including other people's information. But nobody could help out Aether on how to find the Lesser Lord Kusanali, as barely anyone follows her compared to the former Dendro Archon Greater Lord Rook Adivata, and the sages have rejected the current Dendro Archon, so she is isolated and not this powerful. Sages are people with the highest positions in the Academia, and the Grand Sage is the leader of the Academia. Either way, Aether eventually discovered a rare follower of Lesser Lord Kusanali who goes by the name of Dunyazad. She also has a bodyguard by the name of Dr. Dr is a member of the Eremites, an organization from Sumeru Desert filled with a bunch of mercenaries that deal with business from other organizations depending on the pay. Dunyazad was planning to set up Subzairus Festival, which is a celebration of Lesser Lord Kusanali's birthday. Dunyazad then took us to the Grand Bazaar where we met Nilou, a professional dancer and another follower of Lesser Lord Kusanali. She was planning to perform the dance of Subzairus and were now making preparations. In the meantime, Aether and Paimon went to take a look around Port Ormos and met someone by the name of Alhaitham, a scribe from the Academia. He tells us about the knowledge capsules which contained valuable information related to the Subzairus Festival and Lesser Lord Kusanali, and he also sends them to a greedy merchant named Dori, from whom we bought some of those capsules. We also learned that by using those devices a user can go insane due to giving too much information into user's mind, which is exactly what happened to one of the Eremite leaders, Mazri, who was in a possession of the knowledge capsule. Aether and Paimon then returned to Dunyazad, who was at the Grand Bazaar, and the preparations were already over, so the next morning it was already a day of Subzairus Festival. By spending more time with Dunyazad, we learnt that just like Kole, Dunyazad also has Elazar. Then the group together went back to the Grand Bazaar to see Nilou performing Dance of Subzairus, but unfortunately the Grand Sage of the Academia shut it down, as he said that it was violating the laws. Then Aether and Paimon went back to sleep only to find themselves in the same day of Subzairus Festival. In truth, they were trapped in Samsara, the constant loop of the same day of Subzairus Festival. This is where Aether finally met Nahida, also known as Lesser Lord Kusanali, who helped him break out of those repetitive days. We all later realized that all of this is actually Nilou's dream, and so we woke her up and all of them finally broke out of this never-ending day. We also learned that Nahida has the powers to possess people. For example, she took control of Catherine, and later on we met Ildotore, also known as the Doctor, who was actually the one behind that never-ending day occurrence. This dream was actually an experiment by Ildotore to provide the Academia with a new god, which would be Wanderer, as of course they rejected Lesser Lord Kusanali. Wanderer, also known as Scaramouche, was actually betrayed and abandoned multiple times, starting off with his creator, who is none other than Raiden Shogun. This way he became the Fatui Harbinger and was now planning to become a god. Next up, Aether traveled to the desert. There we met a couple more people, starting with Candace, who is a guardian of deserted Aru village, and Sino, the General Mahamatra, and Matras are the disciplinary officers at the Academia. Dr and Alhaitham were also there, and eventually the group went to fight against a group of Eremites, and then an earthquake happened which got everyone to the King Deshret's room. ruins where we learn a lot of important stuff that I already mentioned before when talking about withering. Greater Lord Rukkhadevata got reverted to a small child when King Deshret sacrificed himself to prevent the forbidden knowledge from ever coming back, which explains on why is her reincarnation Nahida child-sized. Then the group finally learned the truth about academia planning to create a new god and the dream samsara of the Sub-Xeris festival day being a part of the process as the doctor's experiment. With that they now started making plans on how to strike at the academia. Then they started executing their plan by Aether and Paimon going inside the Grand Sage Azar's office with Alhaitham to trick him and by learning about the knowledge capsules. Alhaitham used it, resulting in Azar locking up Aether and Paimon while taking Alhaitham away. With that, Nilou performed her dance in front of the academia and a kid disguised in Nahida ran around, which made him think that Nahida escaped the sanctuary of Surasthana, a place where the academia was keeping Nahida imprisoned. This lured all of the guards inside the academia away, and Dr then came to get Aether and Paimon out of the cell. Meanwhile, as Azar came to investigate Sanctuary of Surasthana, Sino had arrested him. Next up, Aether went to meet with Nahida, who revealed the location to the creation of a new god. With that they got inside the facility, defeated the newly born god, and Nahida took the Electro Noses from him. Then we used the power of Dendro and Electro Noses that got us inside Rukkhadevata's final memory. The former Dendro Archon erased herself from existence in order to save Erman's soul from withering, which means that withering got cleared, therefore all of the people with Elazar got cured as well. Only Aether remembers Rukkhadevata as they do not hail from Teyvat. Although unfortunately Il-Dottore returned once again, who negotiated with Nahida, and she ended up giving him both Electro and Dendro Noses. The Grand Sage Azar in the meantime got exiled to the forest along with his accomplices as Alhaitham became the temporary acting Grand Sage of the Academia. With Nahida being the only Dendro Archon, as technically Rukkhadevata never existed, everyone respects Lesser Lord Kusanali now. In the meantime, Scaramouche was recovering somewhere in Nahida's custody. Scaramouche eventually got out of the coma and realized that Il-Dottore was the guy who killed one of his friends, who Scaramouche considered that he betrayed him. So a human actually never betrayed him in the first place, therefore Scaramouche now regretted all of the evil deeds he did. With that, Scaramouche attempted to erase himself from the history at the Erman's Soul in order to change the past and give his deceased friends another chance in life. Nobody remembered Scaramouche anymore except Aether, as of course he's not from this world, but he luckily didn't actually fully delete himself from the existence. That's because no one can, and Scaramouche only deleted the records of memories of himself. Greater Lord Rukkhadevata was an exception, as she created her reincarnation to do the work for her. They eventually found him working for some merchant and living a normal relaxing life and brought him to Nahida, who actually knew him, and it's all thanks to her memory backup that she could remember him. Together we showed Scaramouche how was his previous life like, and eventually Nahida gave him his memories back. After going through all the pain of remembering his memories from centuries ago, he received his Animo vision and defeated the evil god. With that, Scaramouche was now finally back, except that people who are not named Nahida, Aether and Paimon didn't remember him, and Fatui Harbingers have an empty sixth spot as Scaramouche technically never existed. Scaramouche was now the Wanderer, who also wants to get revenge on the people who betrayed him, especially Il-Dottore. One day while wandering around Port Ormuz, our mysterious old friend invited Aether to meet him in Sumeru. Aether accepts his invitation, and during their meeting Dainsleif showed up, who revealed Kaeya's true identity. Kaeya is a descendant of Abyss Order's founder. The Abyss founder was Clotar Alberich, who had a son named Caribert, who became the Hilichurl because of the curse, of course. We found Clotar at the abandoned hut and helped him in taking care of his cursed son, only so he wandered off from his bed and took off his Hilichurl mask when affected by the abyssal power. We haven't saw what exactly happened to Caribert, but did realize that we were inside Lumine's memory ever since we met Clotar, which makes sense as he is Kaeya's ancestor who founded the Abyss Order and worked with Lumine centuries ago. As for Kaeya, he is the current generation of the Alberich clan and the descendant of Clotar and Caribert, like Dainsleif mentioned. He does come from Khaenri'ah and was actually supposed to work for the Abyss Order, as he is their last hope for something that is yet to be probably revealed in the upcoming quests, and was sent on a mission as a spy by his biological father, who is from Khaenri'ah. For this mission his dad abandoned him in Mondstadt. However, Kaeya quickly turned his back on the Abyss Order as Diluc and his family had raised him kindly, which is how he is now the cavalry captain from Knights of Favonius. I already made a video talking about Kaeya anyway, so you can go check this video if interested. With the Sumeru Archon quest completed, Scaramouche being dealt with and learning more valuable information in another Dainsleif quest, we finally move on to Fontaine. At the entrance we met two magicians named Liyue and Lynette, who were obviously the siblings, and they brought Aether and Paimon to the Hydro Archon herself, known as Lady Furina. Furina kindly welcomed Aether to their nation, and then both siblings took Aether and Paimon to the third sibling, a diver who goes by the name of Freyminute. Then they tasked Aether to take supplies to the workshop, and so he complied, and there he actually met his buddy Tartaglia. He was here as he was feeling in a bad mood, yet agreed to duel with Clorinde, Fontaine's champion duelist, who is currently working for Furina as her bodyguard. However, Tartaglia lost control of his hydro vision, but luckily has his electro delusion as his backup, so he gave his vision to Aether as he trusted him that he will take care of it. Then Aether traveled to the Opera Eclipse to see Liyue and Lynette's magic show. However, the show went completely wrong, and as the water tank dropped, it killed one of Liyue's assistants. After that, the entire opera house of course got under lockdown, so no one could leave the building until the investigation ends. We also learned that Liyue, Lynette and Freyminute are children of Arlecchino, who is the fourth Fatui Harbingers and the director of the House of the Hearth, which is an orphanage. Then met Navia, who is a president of Spinar the Rusula, an organization from Fontaine that simply helps other people and solves difficult cases. We also met Neuvillette, Fontaine's chief judge, so he is another ruler of Fontaine besides Furina, as Fontaine runs on judicial system. Then we went on a trial, and at the end it turned out that the culprit behind all of this was a girl named Liliane, who was also a thief, even stealing a ticket just to see the magic show. She didn't mean to kill the guy, but had no choice, as he was the one who actually sabotaged the water tank in order to make her dissolve into primordial seawater. Primordial sea is located under Fontaine and has the ability to dissolve people into the water. The reason on why the guy tried to do this was because he was actually working for Vashir, who is behind the serial disappearances that involves multiple women. There was also a water creature by the name of Oceanid inside some fountain, who actually used to be Vashir's wife before she got dissolved into the water. Aether then kept investigating on who is Vashir with the help of Navia, and eventually found out that he was hiding his true identity as Marcel. The reason on why he did it was because to start it off, his wife Venier dissolved into the water, and so he tried to bring her back by kidnapping multiple women and dissolving them as an experiment. As guards took Vashir away, Tartaglia during our investigation got accused of being the culprit behind the disappearances, so he had to prove himself to be innocent. However, the machine for some reason declared that he was guilty. Guards then took Tartaglia away once Neuvillette got him under control. Vashir wanted to see Venier once again, and Neuvillette was kind enough to allow him to do this. Despite all of the horrible things he had done, this one Oceanid actually contained all of the women who got dissolved into the water, which means all of his victims and Venier, who ended Vashir's life anyway. Tartaglia in the meantime got out of the prison, and Sir Neuvillette sends Aether and Paimon inside Fortress of Meripid prison to investigate about Tartaglia's disappearance. He gave him fake charges on apparently eating Fiorina's cakes, and as they supposedly ate Hydro Archon's food without her permission, they now spent the next 45 days inside Fortress of Meripid as inmates. In there we met Wriothesley, who is a prison's administrator, and the head nurse Siege Wine. Inside the prison were actually also Lini, Lynette and Freyminute, who were also investigating the case. Luckily, as Aether was in possession of Child's vision, he could see the flashbacks during his sleep, which showed him where did Tartaglia go. One day the entire fortress of Meripid was in trouble as the primordial sea from the underground was getting inside, and Sir Aether and Paimon went out of here and made it to the surface. Then they finally got to meet Arlecchino, a father of Lini, Lynette and Freyminute. The reason why her children address her as father instead of mother is because mother was the previous Fatui harbinger and director of House of the Hearth called Crucibina, who was killed by Arlecchino, and as she replaced Crucibina's position, she decided to raise her children as a strict father. Then we learned that Neuvillette is actually a hydro dragon, one of the sovereigns who ruled Teyvat in ancient times. However, he wasn't as powerful as he lost his authority to power usage, but just enough to save the prison. Aether and Paimon's sentence now ended. They went to Posen, which is where Navia lives, and realized that primordial seawater rose, which dissolved and killed lots of people in that place, including Navia's attendants. As we were in a graveyard mourning Navia's attendants and other victims, Arlecchino came by and told us that a kid stumbled upon some ancient ruins, and so we decided to visit them. In here we discovered 4 stone slates that represented prophecy about Fontaine's destruction, and on the second one was Egeria, who was a previous Hydro Archon, while the first one was actually missing. Aether then figured out that Fiorina is actually a fraud who is literally pretending to be a real god, and decided to plan on how to trap her with his friends. Eventually we have managed to get her to the trial, all thanks to everyone's talents including Lini's magic skills. Fiorina ended up being exposed for really pretending to be a god, much to the audience's surprise, and the machine declares that she should be punished by the death sentence, which is something that has never even happened before. Then Freyminute finally managed to come back and showed us the missing first stone slate, which represented Egeria turning Oceanids into humans. This only means that people from Fontaine are not actually real humans but originally Oceanids, which explains on why can people dissolve into the water and transform into Oceanids. The prophecy also stated that the giant-looking whale will come out, which it did from the ground and was about to consume people of Fontaine. But luckily Tartaglia came in and prevented the monster from doing it so. In truth, this monster had wandered around Primordial Sea for a long time and was the culprit behind the rising water levels. This includes the disaster that happened back in Posen. This monster must be stopped before it's too late. In the meantime, the machine was preparing Fiorina's death sentence, and Neuvillette ended at some other place. This is where he met Fossalors, the real Hydro Archon, the Archon that came after Egeria. In reality, Fiorina is actually a human separated from Fossalor's divinity, so the real Hydro Archon could exist separately. Everything she had done was to prevent the prophecy to come true, even deceiving heavenly principles. Fiorina played as a god for centuries on stage, while Fossalors ended up executing herself, so this way Neuvillette finally gained back the authority to use all of his powers as the Hydro Dragon. Now with his powers restored, he could finally save people from the primordial seawater and defeat that whale monster. After defeating it, Skirk appeared, who is Tartaglia's master. Skirk talks about a few sinners of Khaenri'ah, the ones we already know of. Sortalogi, who is Skirk's master and actually has this whale monster as a pet. Veda Folnir, who is Dainsleif's older brother and Rhine daughter, an alchemist who created Duran and Albedo. Then the water flooded Fontaine, but people were unaffected this time due to Fossalor's deception and Neuvillette's restored powers saving everyone. This way Fontaine was saved, as people were now real humans, all thanks to Fossalors and Neuvillette, so the prophecy ended up being wrong. With this, Fossalors was the last remaining Hydro Archon that was now gone, and so Fiorina now lives a life of a normal human being. Neuvillette decided to gift Arlecchino Hydro Noses, after she was looking for it as Fiorina never had it. This only means that Fatui are only missing Pyro Archon's noses, as Tsaritsa will obviously give it away anyway. The reason on why he did it is because the noses are actually the remains of third Descender and it would bring misfortune. So Neuvillette decided to give it away for the safety of Fontaine. Descenders are people possibly from another world like Ether, who is the fourth Descender, who are capable of transcending Teyvat's laws, for example Ether having elemental powers without a vision, and the third Descender is deceased. As for Tartaglia, well, he went back to Snezhnaya to recover after all the events that happened to him, and Arlecchino returned his hydrovision back to him in the meantime. If you want to learn more about Tartaglia, then I also made an entire video on him as well. The Fontaine Archon quest ends by Neuvillette revealing some information about Natlan.
You will soon be heading to Natlan, I presume? I'm afraid that I have little talent as a travel guide, so all I can do is tell you what I know about that land. As far as I'm aware, Natlan can be said to be a nation of dragons.
A nation of dragons? You mean like you?
No, I suspect that I would not find myself welcome there. Unlike ancient dragons such as myself, the dragons of Natlan have undergone long years of development and evolution. Large numbers of them have entered a form of coexistence with humanity. Natlan is also the nation of war. War ravages those lands like an undying flame. There is one other piece of information I got incidentally from my negotiations with the Knave that I believe may be useful to you. The Harbinger known as the Captain has thrown his hat into the endless ring of war.
The Captain? Sounds like a real tough customer. Seriously, everywhere you look, there's a Fatui Harbinger doing their thing.
I suggest that you fully prepare yourself before going to Natlan. In the meantime, Fontaine's doors will always be open to you.
Finally, last but not least, we have the most recent yet my current favorite quest in the entire game, which is none other than 4.7 Bedtime Story Quest. I already made a video on this quest anyway, so you can go check it out, and I don't see the point of making a recap on it again. To quickly go through all of the important things that happened in here again. We met Caribert in his human form, who told us that the Loom of Fate is completed and faded away after he gave Dainsleif, who still carried the Eye of the first ever Ruin Guard, a false memory of giving Eye of the Field Tiller to Ether. Inside Caribert's consciousness where he faded away, Ether met Lumine, but as Caribert was now gone, his consciousness eventually collapsed, leading to Ether and Lumine forgetting about their meeting. However, Ether still somehow got the photo of him and Lumine that Caribert took. Now, as I already mentioned, if you want to learn more about this quest, then check out the recap video I made on it. Either way, that's it. We finally made it to the end. I must thank you for clicking on this video and paying attention to it as well. Feel free to let me know in the comments section what do you think about the story so far, or if you have any questions. I must admit that we truly came a long way through all 5 regions. Now all that remains is Natlan, then Snezhnaya, which is where we will get to the bottom of the Fatui, and then finally Khaenri'ah, a region where it will possibly all end. But first we have to get through Natlan, of course, and see if the Fatui will manage to obtain the last noses. In other case, I will see you all in my next video.